Good Morning America, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump.
That's a little bit old, that George.
The chaotic scene minutes into Donald Trump's campaign rally speech in Pennsylvania.
Take a look at what happened.
Secret Service racing to shield the former president as shots rang out. Trump rushed to the hospital. One person killed, 2 others critically injured.
Authorities identify the shooter overnight. This morning, what we know about the 20-year-old armed with an AR-15 style rifle after his home was searched. Was he a lone wolf gunman? Witnesses describe the terrifying scene of bystanders shot right in front of their eyes.
I knew there was no way that he was going to survive that.
President Biden's message to the nation denouncing the shooting.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick.
This morning, our interview with the Senate candidate who was sitting in the front row when the former president was shot, Dave McCormick, joins us live. And right now, the heightened threat, the latest on the FBI's involvement in the Secret Service's investigation. With the Republican National Convention about to get underway, the growing questions about security.
This morning, full team coverage on this special edition of Good Morning America.
From ABC News, live in New York, this is Good Morning America.
Good morning, America. It is a morning so many warned would come. An assassination attempt on a former president, a candidate for president, in a toxic and dangerous political environment. After the shooting and treatment in a hospital, Donald Trump arrived back in New Jersey late last night.
So here's what we know right now as we take you through the events. At approximately 6:15 p.m. last night, shortly into former President Trump's appearance at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, gunfire erupted. Trump said he was, quote, shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of his right ear and felt the bullet ripping through. He was taken to a local hospital. President Biden was briefed on the situation, and the White House confirmed the president spoke with Trump by phone.
This video shows what is believed to be the suspected gunman. And overnight, the shooter was identified. The Secret Service says the 20-year-old was armed with an AR-15 style rifle on the roof of a building under 200 yards from the podium outside the event's security perimeter and was shot and killed by Secret Service agents. Senate candidate Dave McCormick was steps away from Trump at the moment of the shooting. He'll be joining us live just ahead.
We have team coverage this morning from Pennsylvania, Washington, New Jersey, and Milwaukee, where the Republican National Convention was set to begin. Rachel Scott was at the rally when the shots rang out. She starts us off from Butler, Pennsylvania. Good morning, Rachel.
George, good morning to you. We were, in fact, inside of that rally. The former president had just taken the stage, but within minutes into his speech, we started hearing loud popping noises. It was the sound of gunfire, an attempted assassination on a former president just days before he's set to accept the party's nomination.
This is the moment gunfire erupted just minutes into Donald Trump's speech in Pennsylvania.
Take a look at what happened.
At 6:15 p.m. Saturday, several pops could be heard. The former president grabbing his ear, ducking behind the podium. Secret Service members quickly rushing onto the stage to shield him. The crowd just feet away screams, running for cover, as agents lift the former president to his feet.
I got you, sir. I got you, sir.
Let me get my shoes, sir.
Hold that in your head. It's bloody.
So we got to move to the car.
You can see the blood running across Trump's face. As Secret Service agents surround him, the former president reaching through his security detail, pumping his fists in the air. Trump raising one more fist to the crowd as he's put in an armored SUV, rushing him to a local medical center. Trump revealing he was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear.
He started speaking, and then we heard pound, pound, pop, pop.
You said that you heard the popping sounds and you got down?
Sounds. At first you think like maybe firecrackers, but it continued, and then somebody yelled, get down. We got down, and we huddled, and we started praying.
One man seen gripping his chest, another carried away by 2 police officers. Authorities say one attendee was killed, 2 others critically wounded. Law enforcement sources telling ABC News as many as 8 rounds were fired from an AR-style rifle while perched on an adjacent rooftop outside the perimeter of the event, opening fire less than 200 yards away from Trump's location.
You see law enforcement officials right now, they're putting up this caution tape around this area. This is very much an active scene at this moment.
The Secret Service saying they neutralized the suspected gunman, who the FBI later identified as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks. You can see those snipers reacting to the sound of gunshots, shifting their position before responding fire. A law enforcement official briefed on the investigation tells us this image is believed to show that suspected gunman on the roof. President Biden briefed on the situation, addressing the nation.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this.
Shortly after his address, the White House confirming that President Biden and Trump spoke by phone, but the administration did not provide details of their conversation. Trump posting on Truth Social this morning, thanking the Secret Service, saying, "Our love goes out to the other victims and their families. In this moment, it's more important than ever that we stand united and show our true character as Americans, remaining strong and determined and not allowing evil to win." Adding, "I truly love our country and love you all and look forward to speaking to our great nation this week from Wisconsin." And overnight, the former president landing back in Newark hours after an assassination attempt that could have taken his life.
So as of this morning, here is what we do know. One person has died. 2 others were critically wounded and are being currently treated at a nearby hospital. Authorities tell us that all of those victims were male. Their identities have not yet been released, George.
And Rachel, you were right there on the scene. What were you aware of in the moment?
George, to be honest, I think all of us are still sort of processing what we witnessed. I had never been in an active shooter scenario before. Immediately after we heard those loud popping noises, the sound of almost firecrackers, we didn't exactly know what it was. We started just hearing people shouting, "Get down, get down." We heard the screams. I could still recall just the screams of children there with their parents attending this rally. We dove for cover. You know, George, I've been to almost every Trump rally this campaign cycle, and there is this sense of security when you're there. You're at an event with the former president of the United States, Secret Service, law enforcement. You go through the metal detectors, your bags are screened. This was just the unthinkable for so many of us who attended this rally. And leaving that rally yesterday, walking out after our live shots, and just this image of a large American flag hanging over a crime scene, it was just a sobering reality that this, in fact, did just happen right here in the United States shores.
Just terrifying. Okay, Rachel, thanks very much. Michael?
All right, thank you, George. We're joined now by a witness who was in the front row of the rally when the former president was shot. Dave McCormick is the Republican candidate for Senate. Mr. McCormick, thank you for joining us this morning. Please tell us what you saw.
Well, you know, it was I was right in the front row off to President Trump's right, and he had announced me and said, "Come on up on the stage." And so I started to walk up on the stage, and then he said, "No, I'll have you come up in a little bit." And within a minute or two after that, we started to hear the fire, the sort of staccato, and a minute, you know, sort of it started, and then it was clear that it was rifle shots, and the president went down immediately, and the Secret Service covered him, and then he stood up, as you saw, and you saw his fist emerge there as, I think, a sign of assurance and defiance and strength. But at about the same time, behind me, it became clear that someone had been wounded on the bleachers and was being cared for by other attendees, but an innocent bystander. And it was obviously very serious because there was lots of blood. And so the entire place was just on its knees or on the ground. It wasn't clear whether the shooting was stopped. It wasn't clear whether the shooting was from one place or multiple places. And it was, you know, just as the previous segment said, an unthinkable moment. Where the president's life, you know, we now know was saved by an inch.
And you talked about hearing the shots. At what point did you realize that this was an attack, or was that apparent to you immediately?
Well, you know, I've been a military person and I've been a hunter, so I know the sound of gunfire, but it wasn't quite obvious to start with. But when the staccato nature, when it felt like 7 or 8 shots, I'm not sure exactly how many it was, but then it became obvious that it was gunfire, and everybody went down, and then obviously the entire Secret Service team went into action to protect the president, and it was obvious we were under fire, under assault at that point.
And what was your sense of where the shots came from?
It wasn't completely clear. It's hard to tell sometimes. It felt to me like they were off to the president's left as he was facing the crowd, because the person behind me was shot and the president was shot, which is consistent with some of the things I'm seeing on the reporting now. But it's really hard to tell. In fact, I thought that there might be two shooters because there was so much gunfire and it was all in unison. But it looks like there was only one at the time. But it's very difficult to identify exactly where it was, and it was obviously very chaotic the moment it started.
So what was running through your mind when you realized what was going on?
Well, originally, once the initial firing stopped, it was clear somebody was injured behind me. So I stood up, and we were trying to get medics in, and just trying to make sure we assessed how who was hurt and how many people were hurt. And then a gentleman next to me said, "Get down. This might not be over." And so I initially, it was clear the president had the care that he needed, and he was being moved. But it wasn't clear that the crowd was very dense, and there was at least one. And now I'm now understanding there were multiple people behind me that were injured, but one person behind me was clearly in duress, and there was a lot of blood, and we were trying to get the medics in there, but it was very dense. It was hard to do. Eventually, some police officers came in and carried the man out and took him to medical care. But the initial reaction was making sure we got the right medical care we needed for the innocent bystanders.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. Well, Mr. Dave McCormick, thank you for your first-person explanation of what you saw. We really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Robin?
All right, Michael. Overnight, the shooter was identified. Let's bring in our chief law and justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, with the latest on the investigation. Good morning to you, Pierre.
Robin, good morning. Today, the most exhaustive investigation into a single suspect in recent history continues as the FBI desperately tries to find the motive for the man they say tried to assassinate former President Trump.
We had what we're calling an assassination attempt against our former president, Donald Trump.
This morning, an intensive investigation into the man believed to have been the shooter trying to kill former President Trump. In this video, believed to be the suspected gunman, according to a law enforcement official briefed on the investigation, a man in what appears to be a T-shirt and khaki shorts on a rooftop allegedly firing an AR-15 style assault rifle in the direction of the Trump rally.
Shots fired towards the blue water tank.
And in this aerial video from our affiliate WTAE, you see a man's body after he was shot and killed by what sources say was a Secret Service counter sniper. The FBI overnight using DNA and biometrics to identify the suspect as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania.
And our hearts go out to the victims of this heinous act which occurred today.
Searches conducted overnight at the suspect's home and locations associated with the young man, as authorities try to piece together his background and potential motive. Law enforcement sources telling ABC News the early evidence points to the shooter being a lone wolf gunman.
We have no reason to believe that there is any other existing threat out there.
Initial investigation complicated by a sprawling crime scene and concerns the suspect might have left behind explosives.
There was identification of suspicious packages around where the shooter was, and so we deployed, in an abundance of caution, bomb assets to make sure that those were cleared.
The state police will conduct the investigation involving the murder of an innocent spectator and two others in the crowd who were critically wounded, while the FBI conducts the investigation into the assassination plot.
The FBI has deployed a number of our resources, including investigative agents, our evidence response team, bomb technicians.
The FBI director is personally involved in this case, which is now the highest priority of the FBI. The Attorney General has repeatedly warned about a surge in threats of political violence. And law enforcement sources have been telling me for months that this is perhaps the most dangerous threat environment since 9/11, Robin.
Yes, we have been hearing that, Pierre. And Pierre, there are already calls for an investigation into the Secret Service.
That's right, Robin. The House Oversight Committee chairman has officially invited the Secret Service director to appear before a hearing on July 22nd. I'm told by the Secret Service this morning that the director will cooperate with any congressional investigation and that an internal investigation will now be launched to review the security for yesterday's event. One thing that will be looked at is whether the security perimeter needs to be pushed back even further, Robin.
So many questions need to be answered. Pierre, thank you. Shortly after the shooting, President Biden issued a statement and then appeared before cameras to denounce political violence. Let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce. Good morning to you, Mary.
Good morning, Robin. Well, overnight, the president racing back here to the White House, cutting short his weekend in Delaware to closely monitor this crisis. The president reaching out and speaking with Donald Trump, but the White House is not providing any detail of that conversation. The two men, of course, do not speak often. This is an incredibly rare thing for them to connect. And the president earlier did say he was grateful that Trump is safe and was praying for him. The president is now calling for the country to unite in this moment. He is strongly condemning this violence and trying to dial down the political temperature in this country. The president's campaign also quickly hitting the pause button. They are stopping their political communication, pulling down their ads, pulling them off of the airwaves. It is a sign that for now they are trying to put politics aside, but there is no question this has completely upended this race. Now, later this morning here at the White House, the president will be briefed by his Homeland Security team and law enforcement officials. No word yet on whether the president, though, plans to change his upcoming campaign travel. Michael.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Mary. And Donald Trump touched down in New Jersey overnight and headed to his home in Bedminster, New Jersey, where our Trevor Ault joined us from there. Good morning, Trevor.
Good morning, Michael. So the former president arrived here in Bedminster well after midnight. He landed at Newark Airport, where he was surrounded by the Secret Service counter-assault team, a very visible display of force as his motorcade then took him to Trump National, his golf course. This is a place where we have seen him spend a lot of time over the past 8 years during some of the most stressful moments of his presidency and the aftermath, although this is very different from anything we have ever seen the former president go through before. And we have heard from several members of his family, particularly from his children. His daughter Ivanka writing, "I love you, Dad, today and always." His sons Don Jr. and Eric still tying things back to the upcoming election, with Don Jr. writing, "He'll never stop fighting for America," and Eric writing, "This is the fighter America needs," and then a follow-up post saying, "Never surrender." Now, the former president was already planning on staying here in Bedminster after his rally. It's unclear now how long he will be here as he recovers from this assassination attempt. George.
Okay, Trevor, thanks very much. Let's bring our chief Washington correspondent, John Carlos, at Republican National Convention site in Milwaukee. And John, this is reverberating across the political world, including former presidents.
Absolutely, George. We're hearing condemnations across the political world of what happened, calls for calm, including from the former presidents. Former President Obama said there is absolutely no place for political violence in our democracy. We should all be relieved that former President Trump was not seriously hurt, and use this moment to recommit ourselves to civility and respect in our politics. Michelle and I are wishing him a quick recovery. Former President Bush also putting out a statement saying, "Laura and I are grateful President Trump is safe following the cowardly attack on his life." And former President Clinton saying violence has no place in America, especially in our political process. Hillary and I are thankful that President Trump is safe, and heartbroken for all those affected by the attack at today's rally. So that's and I got to tell you, I was here on the floor of this convention, George, talking to the chairman of the Republican National Committee when this news broke. Somebody told me about it. I walked up to Chairman Michael Whatley, told him shots were just fired at the rally in Pennsylvania. As I was doing that, an aide came up to him, gave him the phone, whisked him off the floor. Clearly an event that is going to have repercussions, not just for what happens here in Milwaukee, but for the entire political process and this election.
What does it mean for Milwaukee, for the convention? What do we know?
Well, the immediate impact was the pre-convention activities. There was a big welcome party planned last night. That was all canceled. But, George, I get the sense here that this convention is going to go forward in all force. In fact, one of those involved in the planning said the convention will continue with a vengeance. I think you will see that image of Donald Trump with his arm raised, blood on his face. That will become the symbol of this convention. I don't think you're going to see anything scaled back here. Perhaps some of the events outside of the convention hall, but this convention is going to go forward.
Okay, John Carl, thanks very much. Let's get more on the security and threat environment with our senior investigative correspondent, Aaron Katursky. Good morning, Aaron.
George, good morning to you. I can tell you the U.S. Secret Service is going to be reassessing its security plan for the Republican National Convention starting tomorrow there in Milwaukee, where John is. And that happened almost right away after this assassination attempt here in Pennsylvania. And even before it, officials had feared that the country's bitter political divisions could result in violence, with elections, political candidates, and political events have long been considered targets, and threats against the president, members of Congress, and judges have been surging. Authorities in Washington, D.C. are now stepping up security for Supreme Court justices. In New York, heavily armed officers descended on Trump Tower and other locations associated with Donald Trump as the investigation continues here in Butler to figure out why this young man armed with an AR-style rifle apparently acted alone with no apparent ties to any terror group. Donald Trump, George, is long gone from here, but the fear is what happened to him here in Butler, Pennsylvania, could lead to yet more violence, George.
It is a fear that has been growing for some time. Aaron Katursky, thanks very much.